Hello guys and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now if you're new to this channel, my name is Nabil Bashir and I have been a graphic designer for nearly 10 years. And my goal with this YouTube channel is to teach you guys everything you need to know about thumbnail design. The goal is to have weekly in-depth tutorials and so you can follow along with them. And if you have any suggestions on how I can improve or how I can do things better for you guys to serve you guys better, please let me know in the comment section down below. So today we will be creating an Iman Gadzhi thumbnail. Now I'll be taking inspiration from the thumbnail you see on screen and we're just going to make some adjustments to it and make it our own. If you want to follow along with this tutorial, just make sure you have an image selected that you would like to use. Everything else will be provided in the links in the description. Okay, so let's make a new document. So we're going to click new file, 1920 by 1080, and we'll keep all the other options the same and click create. Okay guys, so the first step is to create the background. So what we will do now is I'm going to add in the background gradient, which is a sunset theme, which I'm trying to go for. Now I'll provide you with the hex code so you can follow along and you can do the exact same thing. And to add a gradient, what you would need to do is go to the adjustment layers and go to gradient, like so. And then within here, you just click in gradient and you would adjust these two right here. Now if you see it being transparent, just remove the top box like this. So sort of click on it and drag it up and that will remove the transparency from the gradient. Okay, so just adjust these two and I'll give you the hex code right now. Okay, so here we have our sunset gradient and I'll just click on it right here and you can see that these are the settings I've kept. So scale to 56% and angle at 90 and style to linear. Click OK. Now I've already given you the hex code, so just follow along and do those things right now and let us move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step will be to add in our grid texture. Now I have one here and I found this on FreePic and I will link this in the description down below. Okay, so let's just drag it into our document and resize it to fit on screen better. I just want to resize this a little bit more, so Command or Control T, and we are just going to increase the size of this ever so slightly so it all fits on the screen. You also want to make sure it sort of fits in a way that looks nice, so you want to avoid these little bits being on the edges because it just doesn't look good. So let's just keep increasing the size until those are vanished. Something like this should be fine and click enter. Okay, let's zoom in right now and we will go to the blending modes and we will put this to screen. And we will put the opacity down to about 15%. So let's just go down to about 15%. I would actually say 13 looks even better. Now you might be thinking that the grid texture is barely visible, but when you sharpen the image at the end in our camera raw filter step, you will see that this grid texture will be much more prominent. Now it's time to add in an image of a table. Now for this thumbnail, I will be putting one of my elbows on the table and we are going to make that look a little bit more realistic. But first, let's start off by just adding the table into our document, like so. Okay. And let's just first remove the background from the image. So what we can do really quickly is use the magic wand tool and we will just click on the white background and then press backspace and that should do the trick. Then press Command or Control D to deselect. And so from here, let's now expand the edges of the table so that they are no longer visible on the screen. So let's press Command or Control T with the tables layer being selected. And then we are going to, on both sides, just drag it out ever so slightly so that the corners are no longer visible. So as you can see, we still have the back corners visible, so let's just keep expanding and stretching it out until they are no longer visible. Now let's just drag it lower to something like this. Actually, I'm going to drag it a little bit lower so that the edges are no longer visible at the front. Something like this looks pretty good to me. Now obviously it's pretty much just blending in with the background right now, so we need to change the color of the table so that it stands out from the background. Okay, so let's go to hue and saturation, so adjustment layers, hue and saturation. Let's also create a clipping mask, so have your mouse hover over between the two layers and then just press Alt or Option and then we can adjust the color of the table. So I'm thinking to make it more of a brownish color, so let's just try and do that right now. So let's first click colorize. Let's have it to some sort of orange hue, have the saturation relatively in the middle and then just decrease the brightness value to something like that. Should be fine. Okay, now it's looking pretty bland. So what we can do is we can actually add some shadows into the table. So what I will do is I will have a brush tool selected press B for the brush tool and first create a new layer. So let's have the brush tool selected and then just set your color to black and then have the flow set to about 50%. And we are just going to lightly tap on the table like so. Also make sure to have your clipping mask attached to the table. And then we are going to change the blending mode to something which blends in nicely. So let's just keep messing around with these. I think overlay looks pretty good. And then we can adjust the opacity. So it just gives a little bit more depth and detail to the table. What we can also do is we can right click on the table layer and we can convert it into a smart object now. And we can go to filter, camera raw filter, and we can increase the texture and clarity of this table to make it more detailed. So let's just wait for this to load up. Okay, so go to detail, increase the sharpening. So let's just take this to 30. And then also on the effects, let's go to texture and increase the texture to 20 and the clarity to 20 as well. And then click OK. And you'll start to see there's a little bit more detail back into the table. Okay, so I've just dragged down the table slightly and I've also adjusted the color of it. And this is something which is personal preference. So you can spend as long as you need and just get it to how you'd like it to look. Okay, so now it's time to add in the main subject, which is me. Okay, so here I have a cutout of an image of myself, which I just took on a normal iPhone camera. And I just made some adjustments to it via camera raw filter and made sure to cut it out using the pen tool. If you want a full video on how to retouch images, just leave that request in the comment section down below and I will make that for you guys. Okay, so let's just drag my image into the original document. And so as you can see, with the sort of pose I was doing, it's a perfect pose to have my elbow on the table. So as you can see right now, it looks as if my elbow is on the table. Let me just drag it down a little bit more like that. And then I'm also going to just bring down the table a little bit. Something like this should be fine. Maybe resize this to be a little bit smaller as well. So just ever so slightly smaller. Okay, that's looking really good. Okay, and then just with the table, drag it a little bit more down like this. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Now we just want to zoom out a little bit and have a visual and see if it's centered. So it does look pretty centered. Maybe needs to be moved a little bit more to the right. But yes, that's looking pretty good to me. Okay guys, now you can see that the thumbnail is starting to come together. The next step will be to add some shadowing underneath the elbow to create a realistic effect. So let us go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so let's have the brush tool selected. So B for the shortcut for the brush tool. And then we are going to first change the shape of the brush. So as you can see right here in this square box, we are able here to adjust the shape of the brush. So when I do this and I adjust the shape like that, when I press enter, we can now see that we have an oval shaped brush. So I'm just going to make it even more narrower, something, if that's even a word, narrower. I don't think that's a word. Let's make it even more narrow to something about that. And let's just decrease the brush size. Okay, so we're going to zoom into the elbow area. Like so. Okay, and with the arrow keys you can also change the direction of the brush. So when I hold down right, you can see that it moves in a clockwise trajectory, and then the same thing when I click left, it goes in an anti-clockwise motion. If you want to speed up the change of the brush direction, you just hold down shift and then you can change it really quickly like that. Okay, so I want my brush angle to be horizontal to something like this. It's pretty good like that. So we're just going to resize the brush to even be a little bit more smaller, and we want to create a layer behind the subject layer. So let's just do that right now. So create a layer behind the subject layer, and let's just rename this to shadow. Okay, and we want to have our flow set to 50%. Make sure that we have the color black selected. We want to lightly tap underneath the point of contact. Now the shadow will be the darkest at where the elbow actually meets the table. That's how it would look realistic. And then as you sort of branch out, you want to decrease the strength of the shadow. So let's put that to 10% now, and we can sort of branch out with our shadows and sort of lightly tap again like so. And also let's create a clipping mask and attach that to the bottom layer. So that's just going to attach to the table so that we don't have shadows sort of branching out onto the background. Okay, and now if we zoom out, you can see that it looks more realistic. Here's the before and here's an after. Now this looks too strong, so I will decrease the opacity of this ever so slightly. Maybe we'll take this down to about 70%. Now I could make this even more realistic, but just because this is a thumbnail and it's such a small detail, I don't really think it's worth doing. But if I was to do it, I would make the elbow darker as well, because as you can see right here, it's sort of bright and it doesn't look realistic. I would darken the arm underneath here. Anyhow, moving on. Okay guys, so I just want to add a outer glow effect to my subject. So I'm going to double click and then click on outer glow, and then I'm just going to adjust the settings and add a little subtle glow to myself. Okay, so we'll keep the opacity to about 20 and maybe decrease the size a little bit. Maybe increase the opacity to about 25, and that looks pretty good to me, and then click OK. Now we've got a little bit of a dilemma. As you can see, we now have an outer glow effect covering our shadow that we just created earlier. We also have an outer glow effect which is sort of going over the table, and it just doesn't look good. So let us remedy that right now. So let's just zoom out a little bit, and then I'm going to right click on the outer glow effect, and then we are going to go to create layer. What that does is it just separates the effect into its own separate layer. And with this, you can go ahead and manually adjust just that specific effect. And let me show you how that's done. Okay, so let's do this. So let's just zoom in now. And we are going to create a layer mask on this effect layer. So we are going to click on layer mask. And as you can see, white, if you know about layer mask, reveals, and black conceals. So we want to conceal the effect from certain parts of the image. So what we need to do is we have to have the brush tool selected. Let's just reset our brush to normal. What you can do is you can just click on any of these sort of brushes here and it will just reset back to normal. And then we are going to decrease the size of our brush and then make sure that our flow is set to 100. And with the black color selected because we want to conceal, we are just going to paint over where we don't want the effect to be. As you can see right here, we are now removing the effect. And that's all you need to do, because again, we do want the glow to be on the subject, just not in these specific areas. Okay, so now let's focus on adding the visual elements into the background. Okay, so I'm going to select the ellipse tool, so you can find that here, the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to change my color to a nice red, like so, and I'll put the hex code for that down below. Okay, and I'm now just going to hold down shift and then just drag like so and create a ellipse. I will probably increase the size of this ellipse to something like this, just because you want it to be a clear visual element on the thumbnail, especially from small sizes. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. Okay, and so now we are just going to duplicate this 4 times. So hold down the Alt or Option key and then drag with holding down shift, and just do the same thing over and over again. So again, hold Alt or Option, hold down shift and drag. And we just want to create 4 of these. So Alt or Option and shift drag. Okay, so now we have 4 and we'll worry about placing them in just a moment. I'm just going to come back to the first one. So I'm just going to hide these 3 layers. And I'm just going to focus on the first visual element. Okay guys, so I'm going to press T for the type tool. I'm just going to hover over this shape. Now if I was to click within this ellipse right now, as you can see, Photoshop has this weird sort of setting in which it sort of works the text within the shape for you. It's a new thing, it's added to the updated versions of Photoshop. So in order to avoid that happening, we are just going to undo this right now. And we are going to hold down shift and then click, and that's just going to allow us to create a normal text there as we normally would want to do. Okay, and then we press escape, and then we are going to down command or control T to resize this to fit nicer within the circle. So that's a pretty good size, and let's just move it now to the center of the circle like so. That looks pretty good to me. Okay guys, so I've just completed the same process for all of the other circles, and I just did this to save you guys some time from having to watch me do it myself. So what we have to do now is add the connection lines which bridge all of these steps together, and ultimately it will point towards the text. Okay guys, so I'm just going to separately group all of the ellipse layers so that we have them all nice and organized. So let's just do that really quickly. So I'm just going to highlight the first one and then group that. Highlight the second ellipse, group that. Highlight the third ellipse, group that, and highlight the fourth ellipse and group that. Okay, so now what we can do is we press P for the pen tool, and we are just going to adjust the settings. So have it set to shape. You want the fill to be no fill. You want the stroke to be a white color, and you want to set the stroke to 10 pixels, like so. Okay, now we also want to go into line options. So click on line options, and we are going to click on the dotted line, and we want to go to more options and have the dash set to 3 and keep the gap to 2, and then click OK. Now we are set to go ahead and create our line. So let's do that. Okay, so make your first anchor point within the central area of the circle and just connect the two via 2 anchor points, like so. And you can adjust the anchor points as you please and take as much time as you need to do that. Okay, so that's the first one done. And let's just click outside to see what we're working with. So as you can see, the dashed line is actually above the one, so we have to drag it underneath, like so. So I'm just going to join all of them together, and I'll be back with you in just a second. Okay guys, so I've just done the same steps for the other circles. I've joined them all together, and again, what I will say with this is that there will be a lot of adjusting because it is quite a fiddly thing to do, to get it right, to get the angles right, and to make it look aesthetically pleasing. So just take your time and just keep using the direct selection tool. So have A for the direct selection tool, and you can just click on your line and then just hover over any line, and you can adjust the anchor points until you have a nice line, or curve rather. Like something I can see right now is that the first line is sort of joining in very much so to the left of the actual ellipse. So I want it to be more near the center, so we can adjust that live right now so that you guys can watch how I do it. So let's just go to shape with the direct selection tool. We're going to hover over, and I'm just going to adjust this and bring it more to the center, like so. Okay, maybe we need to also adjust the second line, so go to the second line, and we are going to bring this more towards the center. You want the line to look fluent. You want it to look like it's part of one sort of line. It doesn't have, you're not having multiple different lines. You want it to look like it flows. So you need to get it right. Let's just keep adjusting, like so. And as you can see, it's starting to look much better. Okay guys, so it's still looking a little bit bland, and so I'm just going to spice it up a bit by adding some glows to the dashed lines. Okay, so we have our dashed line here, and I'm going to double click and just add a subtle outer glow to the line. So let's just do that right now. So maybe we'll take the opacity to about 35, and we will just decrease the size ever so slightly, like so. Maybe we can increase the glow to about 40% opacity. Something like that looks absolutely fine, and click OK. And to copy that effect to all the other lines, we can just go to our outer glow, right click, copy layer style, and then we can just go to the other lines and press paste layer style. So we'll just do that for all of the other lines. Paste layer style, and there we have it. We have the outer glow on all of our dashed lines. Okay guys, so let's now add in the text. So what I will do is I will use the font called Proxima Nova, bold italic, and as you can probably tell by now, it's my favorite font. Okay guys, so I'm going to just type in $1 million. Good click me. Okay, yeah, so type in $1 million, and I'm just going to press Command or Control T now to resize this. And we want this to be relatively large because this is an element we want people to see. It's going to engage the viewers and it's going to make them want to click. It's a big number. Everyone's interested in money. Okay, so let's just resize this to be large on screen. Make sure you're holding down the Shift key so that you maintain the dimensions of the text. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Then you just want to center it on screen. Okay, so the first step is we are going to add a gradient to this text. So let's click on Gradients Overlay. Yeah. And let's just adjust this gradient. Now I want the bottom color to be a sort of orange, very vague orange, which sort of matches with the theme of what's going on in the thumbnail right now. So let's just find that sort of shade. Okay. So something like that looks pretty good. Okay, and we want to change the color of this to white. Okay, and I want this slider to be somewhat near the middle in order for it to show more within the text. If we keep it right here, it's almost invisible. So let's just bring some of it back into the text. That looks pretty good to me. And then click OK. What we can do now is we can add in a stroke, a white stroke, okay? And we'll just keep that to 4 pixels and we'll keep it to white. And we want that to be inside. So set the position to inside. What we can do now is we can click on outer glow. Let's just try and add a little bit of a glow to our text. So let's just do that right now. So we'll keep the opacity to about 40 and we will sort of play with the size until we get something which looks good. Subtle glows are always the best. When you try and overdo the glows, it always looks quite amateurish. It doesn't look really good. So just always do it in a subtle way that just catches the eye of the viewer, but never overdo it. Okay, so something like 30 pixels or 29 looks just fine. Okay, it's looking really good. Now let's just circle back to our line. So we want to create the final line, which is pointing towards the text. So let us go ahead and do that right now. So I'm just going to go to shape number 4. I can just probably click it. And then I am in this group going to create another layer and I'm just going to press the pen tool and our settings should be saved given that we haven't done anything with the settings. We will click in the middle and then we will just sort of create another anchor point pointing towards our text like so. We can drag this underneath the shape layer and then we can adjust the anchor points and work with it until we are happy with how it looks. Okay guys, so something like this should be fine. So I'm just going to color code this layer so that I can remember which layer I'm working with here because we have a lot of layers. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is add an arrow pointer. And so we're going to just quickly manually create our own one using the pen tool. So with the pen tool selected, create a new layer. And let's just go to anywhere on the canvas and just create a pointer. Now the good thing is we have a grid texture here, so it sort of gives us some dimensions to work with, which is unintentional, but it works. Okay, and then we are just going to create half of the shape like so. Then you can press Command or Control Enter, and we are going to create a solid color layer, and we are going to change the color to white. Okay, once you have this layer, we are going to duplicate it, so Command or Control J, and then we are going to press Command or Control T to transform, and then right click, and then click on Flip Horizontal, like so. Then we will drag and join the 2 layers together so it creates a sort of pointer. That should just do the trick. Then we can just merge both of these layers by selecting both of them and then pressing Command or Control E. Okay guys, so I'm just going to rename this pointer and then you can adjust the size to create more of an arrow shape. Okay, so something like this looks just fine. Now if we zoom in, we can maybe sharpen the edges by going to Filter, Sharpen, and then just sharpening the edges to get more of a nice crisp sharp look, and then we can just rotate it and take it up there like so. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Okay, so we're now moving on to the final step, which is the infamous camera raw filter. So we always do this at the end, and I encourage you guys, if you don't do this, to always add a camera raw filter to the end of any of the thumbnails that you create, and that will just bring your thumbnails to life. You're really missing out if you're not using it. So let us go ahead and first merge all the layers into one layer. So let's go and click on the top layer and then press Command, Option, Shift and E, and that's going to merge all of our layers in our layer section into one layer. From here we can go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, and then click on Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And now let us begin toggling with the sliders. Okay, so in the light section, let's just toggle about with these sliders. And again, with the Camera Raw Filter, there is no right or wrong. You're simply just toggling until you get a desired result. Okay, so let's just keep going. So exposure, yeah, increase the exposure ever so slightly. That looks pretty good. increase the contrast. Yes, I like that. We might actually decrease the highlights a little bit to -25. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then we are going to decrease, or increase rather, the shadows by decreasing the slider. Okay, the whites we are going to keep at 0. We're not going to toggle with that. We might actually increase the blacks. Okay, we might increase the blacks a little bit more as well. It's looking really nice. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so now let's go into color, and we are going to decrease the saturation of the orange, because as you can see right here, it's too saturated. So let us go ahead and decrease the saturation to something like that. That's looking a little bit better. Okay, we might increase the vibrance, so we'll bring that slider to +7. Okay, yeah, let's move into effects. Let's increase the texture to 15 and increase the clarity to 10. That's looking pretty good. And we want to have a vignette, so let's add one right now. So bring the slider backwards like so, and just have a look at how it looks. I don't really like that, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Okay, we're going to add some grain. So 12 is the magic number for me for grain. I always put 12 on all of my thumbnails. So 12 is a magic number, so we're going to keep it at that. Let's now go to sharpening, and let's increase that to 25. It's looking really good. Okay, what else can we do? Let's go to calibration, and let's just adjust the hues of the oranges. So let's focus on that. So we are going to go to red primary, and we're going to just sort of work with the colors here and see what we like. So maybe we go that way, not liking that at all, but going this way looks pretty interesting. So let's just work with what we have. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, and now I'm just going to press OK. Okay guys, so after a couple more tweaks, here is the final result. Now if you like this tutorial and you want to follow along with more tutorials like this one, make sure to subscribe to my channel, because I will be uploading weekly. I promise to have a lot more in store for you guys, so don't you guys worry. Now if you like this tutorial, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and also leave a comment down below if you enjoyed the tutorial. And if you follow along with this tutorial, please share your results with me on Instagram, and I'd be more than happy to see them. Thank you very much for watching today's video, and until next time, peace.